When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands. Then, lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the US. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP Works Wonders.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Monday, December 30th, 2024. Born on this date in 1979, rapper Yellow Wolf of Gadsden. Today we're going to reflect on Jimmy Carter and then talk with state government reporter Mike Cason about the bigger state legislative news out of 2024 and take some peeks ahead as well. Glad y'all are here. My name's Ike Morgan and we're down in Alabama. Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States, who put a little Southern culture in the national spotlight for 4 years, then became perhaps the most popular former president in our lifetimes, passed away Sunday, according to a statement from the Carter Center in Atlanta. Carter was 100 years old, the first ex-president to live that long. His time in office, even in its best light, could be described as complicated. The biggest achievement for President Carter, and so far an enduring one, came when he brokered the peace deal between Egyptian and Israeli leaders at Camp David in 1978 that they signed in 1979. But those were also the days of the misery index references and stagflation, back when most economists didn't yet believe we could have rising unemployment and inflation at the same time. The 444-day Iran hostage crisis probably sealed Carter's fate against Ronald Reagan in 1980. Among controversial policy moves included the Carter administration's giving up control of the Panama Canal. You might even hear that one debated over the coming months. Now, it was in the character category where Carter's approval soared. He served in the Navy and worked his family's peanut farm in Plains, Georgia, before he got into politics. Later, Carter spent his post-presidency building homes with Habitat for Humanity, monitoring elections, advancing public health, negotiating ceasefires, and teaching Sunday school in Plains with Rosalind, his wife of 77 years. And let me say that my Facebook feed is a testament to the Carter's ability to get unlikely folks through the doors of a church. Back in November, we had an interview here on Down in Alabama with veteran journalist Bill Cotterell, who covered Carter's 1976 campaign for president for UPI. Bill shared some thoughts as a member of a press corps that started out pretty skeptical of Carter's all-shucks persona. Bill joked that he got the assignment because his editors thought Carter didn't have a chance at the nomination. Here are a few other excerpts from that interview.
Any anecdotes about Carter, sort of the man that might either surprise us or just, anything you saw on the campaign trail that shows a little bit of a window into who he is?
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of people were surprised, including myself, even though I'd covered the last year and a half of his time as governor. His kind of simplicity and appeal to the public. He did things like he carried his own luggage whenever he got off the airplane. He didn't have them play Hail to the Chief when the usher at the White House would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States." We all, I think, thought it was an act. Sunday school, things like that. People were saying, who invited the Boy Scout? But coming right after the Watergate and some of the scandals in Washington, that kind of simplistic, down-home honesty image, I think it was borne out after his defeat when he worked with Habitat for Humanity and went around the world monitoring elections in, African countries and working for the Carter Center, working for vaccines and really healthcare in countries that were very poor and third world countries. I think his post-presidency showed really the kind of man that at the time we sort of thought, well, this is just a really smart politician, and it was an act. But his genuineness, I think, we've seen in the years since he left the White House. A lot of Southern politicians I've heard make jokes that if we could have just elected him to the former presidency and skipped the 4 years in the White House, elect him straight to the ex-presidency. But he has been a fine individual, and I think there are just many examples through his life where he used to say during the campaign, part of his standard stump speech, he'd say, "I don't have to be president. There are some things that, I won't do." And we in the press all kind of looked at each other and said, "Yeah, sure. That's why you're working 20 hours a day and, campaigning so hard for it." But I think he really meant it. It was just a type of guy he was.
In 2015, when Carter was 91 and remarkably active, he spoke with the Associated Press about the future for him and his wife, Rosalind, who died last November. Quote, "Like every other human being, we also have to be prepared for the end of our life when it comes. We're not looking forward to it, but we are prepared to face it when it comes." We're going to take a quick break for some advertising. We have 2 more days to meet the annual budget after all. When we come back, we'll have Mike Cason on to talk about the top legislative news of the year. Y'all stay with us.
This is an ad from BetterHelp. This holiday season, do something for a special person in your life. You. Give yourself the gift of better mental health. BetterHelp Online Therapy connects you with a qualified therapist via phone, video, or live chat. It's convenient and affordable and can be done from the comfort of your own home. Having someone to talk to is truly a gift, especially during the holidays. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Time to move? Skip the hassles of selling during the holiday season and sell your home directly to Opendoor. Request an all-cash offer in minutes, close, and get paid in days. You can even pick your close date so you can move after New Year's. Start your move at Opendoor.com or download the Opendoor app. Opendoor is represented by Opendoor Brokerage, Inc., license 02061130 in California, and Opendoor Brokerage, LLC in its other markets. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, thanks everybody for staying with us. Today on the show, we have veteran state capitol reporter Mike Cason with us. We're going to try to put a bow on the Alabama political stories of 2024 so we can get on to 25 after this. There's Mike, there's certainly a lot we can talk about. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Ike. I really appreciate it. I'm glad there's some interest in these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always glad to hear from you. And we use so much of your reporting on the show that it's great to finally have you on. Now, there's a whole bunch we could talk about. Like I said, I have really one main question right off the top. What was the biggest state politics story of 2024?
I think it was the failure of the lottery bill. Yet again, a failure of a lottery bill. And, it happens almost every year, but the difference this year was it looked like it was going to pass because House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter, he started way back over a year ago. He assigned some of the House members to study it, and they went all over the state, and they wrote a big sweeping package that had a lottery and casinos and sports betting and this what would have been this big regulatory or a regulatory agency to which they said would have stamped out all the illegal gambling. And it passed the House with votes to spare, which was, pretty shocking. Or was just showed how much of groundwork they had laid for it. And then it went to the Senate. They scaled it way back, and then and they passed it, but it was much changed. And then there was a compromise version that was closer to the Senate version that that the House went along with and passed, but then the Senate, it failed in the Senate by one vote. People want a lottery. I guess it depends on who you ask as far as casinos and sports betting, but I think most people want a lottery, and that was the closest they'd come to getting one in 25 years.
Yeah, and didn't the governor say she really wanted this past year to put it in front of the voters? She put her weight behind it, right?
Yes, she did. Yeah. In fact, she had done that a few years ago too, and it generated some momentum, but it didn't come as close this time. But yeah, the governor's she's been a proponent of that, of getting that put on the ballot. And I know one of the political science professors I talked to a lot, Jess Brown. I remember this year he said, "Well, this is going to be a real test of the leadership in the state. If they want this, they should be able to get it." But they didn't. Governor's got a lot of clout, but for whatever reason, this didn't get over the finish line.
I don't know if a supermajority like we have in Alabama can use up political capital, or the government can, like the way a president does, but man, it seems like this is a real momentum killer for lotteries going forward.
I think it is. I think it seems like it would be hard to mount that kind of momentum again. Yeah, I agree. I don't know what will happen this year, but I hadn't heard any serious talk about it.
It always seems to make its way into the headlines year after year, so I'm sure we'll hear something, even if it's grumbling. Well, what else in 2024? Push through some education stuff.
Yeah, the top priority for the governor and the Republican leadership was the CHOOSE Act, which is the school choice bill, which will allow parents to get these education savings accounts that they could get up to $7,000 to help send their kid to private school, or $2,000 for homeschool. The governor talked about that in her State of the State address. Anyway, it was clearly her top priority, and took a couple of years to get it passed, but it did pass this year, and goes into effect this coming school year. Although it's not yet for all parents. I mean, I think there's income limits on it the first 2 years, but I think starting in 27, 28, it'll be all people will be eligible for it. It's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to have more on that as people start to apply for some of those ESAs in the early January. You don't usually expect there to be much in the way of gun control come through the Alabama legislature, but I know you've written a lot about Glock switches. Can you talk a little bit about whether it had any momentum in 24 and whether that's going to be on the docket next year? I mean,
yes, it had momentum in 24. The sponsor is a Democrat, Philip Ensler of Montgomery, but he did a good job rallying. I say it's the Democrat. They've only got about a fourth of the seats in the House, so it's hard for them to pass anything. But he did a good job building momentum for that, and he got law enforcement to come to the State House to a press conference and talk about how important it was, because those devices are, that turn semi-automatic guns into machine guns, are turning up increasingly at crime scenes and mass shootings and so forth. Anyway, the House passed Ensler's bill, and it did not pass the Senate, but he'll bring it back this year, and I would think it has a very good chance to pass.
Well, the mass shooting on the south side of Birmingham was such a newsmaker,
right?
That's going to put pressure on folks,
right? And those devices are illegal under federal law, but the police say they need a state law too. Because they can't count on the feds to enforce, to arrest everybody that needs to be arrested for that.
That's right, for the local law to go after them.
Yeah,
a state law would help. You talk about a Democrat sponsoring that bill, Ensler in that case.
Yeah.
What is it like in the Capitol to be such a minority? Are the Democrats as much on an island as it seems, or do they have, do their leadership, are they able to bend the ears of the Republican leadership on certain topics?
I think they're able to bend the ears. At least the Republicans give lip service to that. I mean, they're for the most part they seem to have a good relationship, and they don't disagree on everything. But generally, if there's a bill that the Democrats are really opposed to, like they were opposed to the school choice bill,
Mhm.
the Republicans will let them, have their say. That when those bills come to the floor, they'll let them get up and make their arguments for a few hours, maybe, and then at some point they'll just cut off the debate and pass the bill. But I think there's a pretty good working relationship. But being such a minority, there is a lack of clout, I guess.
I guess when we compare the relationship to how things are in Washington, even though Washington is a little more, even, it's hard to look bad on the state level.
That's right. Yeah, it's not as it's not as venomous as it is in Washington at all. And because you see the Democratic leaders and Republican leaders, they seem to genuinely like each other, and they have a lot in common. And there's a lot of there's a lot of people of devout faith on both sides, and there's a lot of the message on the House floor is about relates to that. There's a lot of common bonds, I guess. But when they disagree on something, and the Republicans generally follow the national playbook on the culture issues and so forth, and so there's really never any compromise on that.
Yeah. Big change in leadership in the Senate that may or may not, I guess, affect some of those relationships. You talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Senator Greg Reed from Jasper, he'd been the president pro tem. That's the top ranked senator for several years. And he's leaving the Senate to go to work in the Ivey administration. He's going to be involved in workforce development. That's been kind of his passion. And so the Republican caucus picked Senator Garland Gudger from Coleman to replace Reed. Gudger was in the news this year because he was in a terrible accident on the lake, where a terrible accident involving a wave runner, personal watercraft, or whatever you call it. But he seems okay now. I've seen him. He looks fine. And Reed was a person who really tried to build a good relationships with everybody, and was kind of low key, but very diligent, but sort of low key, I guess, in his personality. And Gudger seems like he may be more of a bold kind of personality. So we'll see. I saw Gudger the other day, and I asked him the priorities for the session, and he said he's polling all the members. That's going to be his guide. So we'll see. But we'll see. I'm sure he'll have his own initiatives that are priorities for him.
So there's not really like education last year with the Choose Act, where it started back in 2022, and the lottery started in 2022. Are we yet to see anything really move to front and center? Are we going to have to wait on the state of the state for that?
That's right. I don't know of any. Yeah, those are good examples of something that big deals that have been in the works for a couple of years. I don't know of anything really that fits that category right now. There may be something I don't know about. Or
Ivey's entering her last 2 years, so
Right.
I don't know if you have a lame duck when you have a super majority that's on your side, but she's getting into her last 2 years, so I guess we can expect a little bit of change there in the way it works between the governor and the legislature.
Right. If if she wants to do something bold, I don't know what would be stopping her at this point. But
Yeah.
I did just think of something that could be pretty big. I don't know how long it'll take to develop, but I know Rebecca Griesbach's been writing about the possible changes in the way they fund schools. That's still in the early stages, but I'm sure you've read about that. But it would change. Right now, Alabama's state school funding is just sort of based on a head count, and it doesn't really differentiate for the systems that have a lot of poor kids or a lot of kids with special needs. And so it sounds like that would be a pretty sweeping change in the way schools are funded. And it sounds like it's something that needs to happen.
Yeah, when you had the Choose Act come in, the concerns, a lot of them were overtaking those head counts away from public schools, and so you take the funding with it.
Right.
I'm sure to some degree that would always be true, but yeah, I can see where that now would be a time to take another look at, are we going to decimate any of these public schools?
Right. And they've also got to make a decision on the overtime tax exemption, which passed in 23, and no state income tax. You don't pay any state income tax if you're a full-time hourly worker. You don't pay state income tax on any work above 40 hours a week. They didn't know how much that was going to cost or how much of an exemption that would amount to, but it turns out it's $230 million during the first 9 months of this year, January through September. It was $230 million taken out in that exemption, and that's money that would have gone to schools. That exemption is scheduled to expire next summer, and so the legislature will have to decide whether to let it expire or extend it or what to do about it.
Yeah, and we're still also coming down off of the real windfalls in revenue that we had because of the strong economy going into the pandemic and a lot of those federal dollars during the pandemic. And so I'm sure that the budgets are going to be a little tighter.
That's right. Several years of just extraordinary amount of money coming into the budgets, and that's flattened out. They've got money in reserve, so it shouldn't be any emergencies, but they're going to be more cautious.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's definitely hope so. Do you have a short list for 26 governor? Do we have any folks angling for that race other than I think a fairly obvious one in the lieutenant governor's chair right now?
Will Ainsworth has been very public about he's considered, and although he hasn't officially committed to it, but I think everybody's expecting that. Rick Pate, the agriculture commissioner, he said he's considering it, but he said he's not really going to sit down and make a decision until after the first of the year. But he's definitely not ruling it out. So, and some people have talked about Steve Marshall, but I haven't ever had a chance to ask him if he's seriously considering, and I doubt I would get a direct answer.
Marshall has certainly approached his job in a very, I don't know what to say. He hasn't been quiet about what he's done. He seems like a guy who has his eye on something else as well.
Yeah, he does. He definitely has made an effort to stay in the public eye, which he's the attorney general, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he's very much on board with the national political movement, Republican movement, fighting everything Biden tries to do and supporting what Trump tries to do.
Yeah, he's joined with the other AGs in other Republican states. It seems like a number of times on national topics.
Yeah, it seems like once a week there's something he and the others have filed to challenge something Biden is doing.
Well, that's the way it works in Montgomery and Washington. You snooze, you lose on that stuff.
Right.
Mike, are we leaving anything out? Are we forgetting anything from 24 that we need to mention one last time?
Well, that was the big controversy over IVF.
Of course.
When the state Supreme Court ruled in the in vitro fertilization case, ruled that the frozen embryos held in storage, had the status of unborn children for the purposes of the Wrongful Death Act, when some embryos got accidentally destroyed and there was a lawsuit.
Yeah.
It caused a turmoil, and some IVF clinics were so concerned about the liability, they stopped giving services for a while, and the legislature scrambled and got a bill passed to give them some immunity. And they resumed services. I think one in Mobile may have permanently closed, but that's an issue that's still out there. there are some people on the religious right that don't think that was handled correctly, because the immunity bill doesn't protect doesn't protect embryos in storage. I mean, their point was that the state Supreme Court had it right. They should have the status of unborn children, the frozen embryos or the embryos in storage.
Mm-hmm.
And so the law right now does not account for that. So
the law was passed so quickly to get, this out there, so that I presume, well, to help those getting IVF, but also to kind of save the Republicans some grief. I'm sure that people think it's pretty sweeping to give them blanket immunity. Has time passed so much now, though? It seems like it's going to be a lot harder by 2025 to get real specific.
I think I know I talked to Randy Brinson, who's head of the Christian Coalition, who's also a physician, and he's trying to get legislators interested in a bill that would tighten up the regulations, along the lines of protecting those embryos. But I think he's had a hard time getting anybody to listen or to sponsor a bill, because it would be a tough thing to pass. So I don't know. I think that most of the Republicans would probably just rather ignore that until they have to confront it again, if they do. Mike
Cason, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Ike. I enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, and I'll just say, one of the best things I could say about a politics reporter: I've worked with you for years, read your work almost religiously during that time. Have no idea who you vote for. Okay. Now, so when I get to tell people what you've reported, I know I'm telling them the truth.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Ike. I appreciate that. Thanks for all the great work you do.
All right. And thanks out there, everybody, for listening to us. Hey, if you want to keep up with Alabama politics going forward, make sure you check out Mike's work and our other reporters at al.com/politics. We're going to be back here again in the morning. Until then, y'all come by and see what we're doing on the internet at al.com.